Interesting opinion about leadership. So when you say you have to be interested in people, can you elaborate a bit on this? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Almost every time that someone asks me, hey, should I do IC or management track? The way I always answer, if you want to consider management track, is that you really need to love working with people. That means managing them, taking care of them, being able to understand different personalities. To me, as a leader, you are not there just to set direction, achieve goals, and party. You are there actually to help people grow as well. So they should grow through you. And it's not just you achieving some kind of goals. So I like this concept called servant leadership, where you actually, as a leader, your number one job is to serve the people around you or reporting to you. I always take that as a principle in my day-to-day job, in my role, that no matter what, if you want to succeed, you have to succeed together with your people. And that's why serving them first would actually give you the best opportunity to actually succeed together.
A cool point. What you mean is, if I try to summarize, is really that your success is driven by the success of your team. So basically, your goal number one is to elevate them and remove the blockers. You need to like the people, but you have to be honest with them. So how do you drive this situation? Like difficult conversations, leading by example?
I mean, there must be something, right? When people say it's a difficult conversation, it is really difficult because it's not just the topic or the content itself that matters, but it's also the emotions, the feelings of the different individuals involved in the conversation. I think one thing that I learned a lot throughout my journey is that even though it is called difficult conversation, you should not shy away from having these difficult conversations. Because the more you try to avoid difficult conversations, over the time, it is like time bomb where suddenly it just exploded. From difficult, it becomes catastrophic, something like that. So I think difficult conversation is something as a manager, you really have to hone your skills. It is not easy in the first place where it was probably your first difficult conversation, but over the time, the more you embrace it and you know that, yeah, I have to do this. Plus the things that matter is always put the empathy, right? The empathy portion of the thing. So you have to always consider the other party as a person, not just an object or some kind of blockers that you have to solve. You have to put them as your first priority, know why certain things happen, and maybe they were not intentionally doing the things that probably is the topic of the difficult conversation. So I think that is key to me, how I approach difficult conversations so far.
Yes, I agree. I believe that, as you say, you are not here to blame somebody for failures or to highlight errors and mistakes just for the sake of doing it. You are actually here so we both recognize that there is a problem and we are all looking for a path forward. I really appreciate that from you. Anything in your past that prepared you to be that kind of leader? Because we see the outside, like you've been in IC, you've been in banks, you've been in Google. Okay, fine. But what prepared you to be a lead?
Yeah, so I try to always draw from my previous experience, about 15 years of career journey so far. So there must be something that I learned. Fortunately, I joined multiple different companies, different types, good culture, bad culture, corporates, startups, MNC versus local. So all this actually kind of like mixed experience for me, where I can tell straight away that, okay, this works and this probably doesn't work. Of course, different context matters, but most of the times I try to draw from that experience. I have this one thing that I learned from one of the online course that I did. So people actually learn through two ways mostly. They call it Kensho and Satori. Maybe I'll explain a little bit. So Kensho actually means that you grow through pain, or you can think of it grow through failures. Sometimes you think that failures is bad, but failures actually teach you something more. So it's not just the failure, but actually the kind of experience that you go through. The other one is actually Satori. Satori means something that you grow through insights. Maybe you find a good mentor or coach. Maybe you learn from books, online course, or maybe you just learn from something that actually gives you enlightenment, so to speak. So throughout my journey, I learned two things from this Kensho and Satori. The first Kensho is actually about the failure in the startup. So I was the head of engineering there. The startup failed. I could feel the frustration myself. How on earth should I do things? Because almost anything that you do seems like a failure. It was also bad because the company itself is also struggling to find product market fit. So it's a combination of different things. And that actually brought me a lot of lessons. Like in engineering, for example, especially in a startup, you can't spend so many months or years just to do expensive re-architecture, redesign, and things like that. because if you don't have product market fit, basically it doesn't matter if you build a gold-plated solution. So that is probably the failure part. And of course, I did so many failures, not just that, but I think nothing teaches you better than failures. So that is one thing that I want to take as a key lesson here. The other one, of course, the Satori. There are so many things that I learned from books, blogs, and recently the podcast, this podcast itself. I learned from various guests, their experience, their knowledge. These are insights for me. They are giving me tons and tons of new perspective on how to approach certain things. I think these are the things that prepares me from the past to do this job. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to elaborate on the startups, but you did it for me. So actually, talking about the Tech Lead Journal, you say you talk to these people and you learn from them. Did you have a big aha moment? Somebody said something and it went like a blinding light in your head saying, of course.
Almost every episode I have that, if not all. If you follow this podcast for quite some time, I always summarize some of the quotes into a daily social media post. Most of the quotes all are curated by me. Those are the interesting quotes that I think, oh, these are insights for me. And maybe someone else would also find the same inspiration. So I would say, yeah, every episode gives me a different perspective, different kinds of learning. So far, I've been fortunate to have about 100 episodes, including yourself. I purposely curate the guests as well. It's not like some random guest that I just could find on the internet or something. But yeah, I try to curate the guests that I'm inviting to the podcast. I love all the insights and the learnings that I have so far.
Cool. So I guess we all have to listen to all the podcasts and draw our own conclusions. Anything that did not prepare you to this experience of being a VP of Launch?
So of course, there are many things. Like I said, no matter what you do, no matter what you have learned in the past, you'll never be prepared. So you're never ready. The few key things that I can probably talk about, this is my first time working in a scale-up company. It's not just startup, but it's a scale-up company. Some of you might have heard this phrase, building the plane while flying it. I guess it's the same experience for me every day. It's not just a modern, well-advanced aeroplane, but it's like maybe mini aeroplane that you could try to fly and it flies. But then, yeah, you have to do so many things to change it while it's flying. Scale up actually is a different kind of a challenge for me. So far, it's been very fruitful and so many things that I learned along the way. So yeah, I was not prepared to handle so many problems, but hey, you just have to improvise. Like I said, you have to be a problem solver. Always try to attack problems from the perspective that you have, from the experience that you have. Just make the decision that you think is best. So I think that's the first thing. Of course, the pandemic brought the other aspects of working remotely. This is also my first time fully remote, plus my team mostly are in Indonesia while I'm in Singapore. Working fully remote definitely offers a different kind of challenges as well. Yeah, I was not prepared. Nobody was prepared anyway during the pandemic, so we all have to improvise as well. And lastly, I would say that in a startup, one of the most important things is about culture, especially when you're working fully remote. Building culture is hard. And I think you really need to be intentional about building culture. Yeah, so those are the things that probably, while I'm not super well prepared, but I'm trying my best to handle those things.